Hey guys, great to share the stage with you today. And I think, for starters, I think it would be amazing if you could tell a little bit more about yourself when it comes to your background and your role and the companies that you're building. So why don't we start with you, Chris?
Yeah, awesome. Hello, welcome everyone who's online watching this today. I've been working in the tech scene for about 20 years now. Started off as a developer, focused on front end, but basically went full stack throughout my career. And I've been leading teams for about the last 10 years. Previous company to Immersive Labs, I worked at Just Eat, quite a well-known company for most people out there. I was there for just over 5 years, left as kind of head of engineering. And for the last 16, 17 months, I've been at Immersive Labs, which is basically a cybersecurity company building an incredible platform, doing all sorts of amazing things around the world right now. So that's me.
Cool. Kelly, I think your problems are over. We seem to be hearing you very well and seeing you. So tell
Great.
us more about yourself.
Hey, folks. Thanks a lot for inviting me to be a part of this event. Just as far as a little bit of background, I've got a long career in IT, over 30 years. I've been a part of 6 startups before Tide, the one that I'm a part of now. And so had a lot of chance to see all sorts of both positive and negative experiences from that, which startups always present. I've been a part of companies like ThoughtWorks, and also fairly recently I spent 4 years at AWS, which I think that's an interesting company from a standpoint of sort of embracing learning from failure. And so that's something that we can talk about. Where I am now is with Tide, which is based in London. Even though I'm based in the US, we have teams in London and Sofia and Hyderabad, and are growing rapidly, doing a fintech software platform.
Yeah, very cool. So you guys represent 2 businesses where any kind of failure of the software is actually quite a lot of stuff at work. Like when TechTree doesn't work, some people just email me that they can't make an application and they're a little bit frustrated. But I guess when you guys work, people can't access their money or they have some serious cyber security challenges. Like, how is working on that critical issue, like changing the approach to, the typical fast to market, lean approach when it comes to that is, working for most of the startups? How you guys are different? Maybe we'll start with you, Kelly, because banking is something that everyone touches, and I'm quite interested how you're balancing the sort of speed with going to market with the sort of security, stability, and the kind of challenges that are important from a banking standpoint.
Well, it has a lot to do with how we have to structure ourselves. I mean, we very much want to be in a startup exploratory mode of being able to try things and experiment. At the same time, as you say, we have some serious responsibilities to our members. I mean, it's their money, it's their business that we're protecting. And so part of what we do is the way we're structured is we have a whole risk and compliance part of our organization. We have a whole security part of our organization. And I'd say every bit as much engineering effort goes into making sure that we're complying with our regulatory burden and our risk and compliance burden in general, as it is towards solving kind of pure engineering problems. And so it's sort of very, very fundamental to the way we work, is making sure that we don't put our customers' money at risk, that we don't cause problems in those areas. So it's sort of like putting first thing first. And that's what you have to do. But then you can still experiment. It doesn't mean that if you're in this area you can't experiment at all. It just means you have to cordon off what you can, where you can play games and where you can't.
Got it. And we'll dig deeper into that on kind of like how you build a team for that kind of approach, etc. But I would also love to hear about Chris's experience, and maybe you can talk a little bit more about what exactly Immersive Lab does, how it's affecting organizations, etc. Because I think not too many people are aware of that on the audience.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, Immersive Labs is a really exciting company. So I joined just following Series B. We did a Series C last year and kind of rapidly expanding the growth of the platform. The simplistic way to look at our platform is training, but it does so much more than that around cybersecurity. It's all about building the knowledge, skills, and judgment of the entire workforce as it relates to kind of cyber threats. So we do that in a number of different ways. The main kind of core part of our product is where people who have a cyber-based role or an application developer or a cloud engineer get actually hands-on with machines that are running virtualized environments in the cloud. So for example, there could be 2 or 3 network machines and you've got a machine that's got a vulnerability or a piece of malware running on it, and you'd be able to actually get hands-on with that and either reverse engineer it or look for indicators of compromise, whatever it might be, but in a very realistic kind of challenge-based environment. And that's really the core of the platform. So because of the scope of the platform, we're not really considered like a critical part of a company's proposition. So therefore, our view of risk and how we think about reliability is reflective of that. Very interesting for me. So coming from my previous company at Just Eat, reliability was everything. In fact, reliability trumped everything. Because if you go down on a Friday, Saturday night for 5-10 minutes, then you're looking at $10 million of lost revenue. And then you multiply that by 3 or 4 or 5 times by the lost customers who then go to a competitor. So you lose the actual lifetime value of the customer. So our response and our focus to reliability was very, very different at Just Eat. So we had a 395s kind of target for reliability. We were consistently 398 and above across all of our services. And this was a highly microservice architecture. So about 930 or more components, individual components running in production. And with a tiering system, so the tier 1 components were fundamental to a user placing an order. So the amount of focus and attention they had was very different to say a tier 4 or tier 5 component, which is just, if it goes down, okay, there's going to be no real business impact of that. So it was a highly mature, highly specialized environment around reliability. Immersive Labs is very different. In fact, we are still a young company. We have a lot of customers and that's growing. And I think one of the things that I've been really focused on is we're very much in the startup mindset when I came in, and we're very innovative, moving very quickly, but we have to now focus that, shift that balance a little bit more towards quality and reliability and stability and scalability. And we're kind of gradually transitioning that because there's a big focus on renewals and retaining customers. So, we have typically an annual kind of renewal cycle for our customers. If our platform is not delivering an enterprise level service to a big enterprise customer, then they may consider going elsewhere. So we're trying to find the balance between making sure we're reliable and stable for the big enterprise customers, but continuing to innovate. And I think what Kelly was saying around still supporting experimentation in a nice controlled way. And we do that through beta programs, feature flags, experimentation platforms, like lots of different ways that you can isolate the kind of innovation that you're doing so that the blast radius is reduced or the number of customers that get exposed to it is reduced as well. So yeah, and we're still working this stuff out as we mature, but that's been a big focus since I've come in over the last kind of 17 months, is working out how can we improve the reliability while still moving really fast and innovating. And those two things can be a little bit opposed at times, but I think if you can find the right mix and balance to do that well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one interesting question that I think everyone in engineering teams is now facing is how are you transforming these practices of collaborating, being fast, being safe, being detailed in a completely remote environment? Has this been like, first of all, did it affect your organization in the last sort of 18 months? And like, what are the ways you were handling like working with potentially remote distributed engineering team, and like how you see the future now that we're sort of we seem to be generally post-COVID pretty much all across Europe. So I'd be interested to hear that from both of your perspective.
Yeah, we've had an interesting experience at Tide. We've basically doubled the size of our company and our staff during the pandemic. We started out with a very kind of an interesting kind of classic startup plan of building beautiful offices in great locations. You know, we were in, they're in London. We have a great office in Sofia, another one in Hyderabad. We were going to, have great teams in those offices. And then the pandemic came along, and we had, huge requirements to build more software, to build it fast. And where people were really fell completely by the wayside. And so we've ended up pretty much, we still use those engineering centers, and we bring people together there when we can to have meetings. But essentially, we've gone to a fully remote kind of a model. And I think in general, we've got people all over the UK. We're using Sofia as a base, but we've got people all around Europe, and we're doing the same thing all around India. And the thing we've learned is that we can be highly productive in this sort of remote type of a mode. It's worked out, as so many companies have found. But we found the way to make it work well for us. We still, we're just now getting back in the mode of having some interaction again. But we have found we were able to make good progress and get good things done in that kind of a remote mode. And I'd say that at this point, it's more of our history and more of our code has been built in this mode than not. So we're I don't know if we're pandemic native. I don't know if that's going to be a term, but that's what we may be. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I guess we are tech. We are a pandemic native business because we started in February. But it's fascinating to hear that a business that's been for a while, Tide, like that is huge, and obviously banking is traditionally considered a sector where people sit in an office, etc., that you've been able to move into that more distributed workforce effectively. Can you try to distill the sort of like 2-3 things that you think were like critical in your approach to make it work? Because I think like not every organization have figured it out. I feel like this is still affecting a lot of team leads, senior engineers, etc. They're still thinking how to run these processes in a smooth and effective way. And I'd be just trying to like get the most important insights from your perspective on what made it work for you.
You want me to
Yeah,
say
yeah,
that?
yeah. Because I'm gonna.
I mean, I'd say that having the appropriate kind of infrastructure and tooling in place. I mean, we have stringent security requirements, and so we had to set things up in a highly secure way, despite being highly distributed. We had the right kind of tool infrastructure set up to allow our teams to do what was necessary, and then a hugely collaborative culture. We had a culture that allowed people. I went through many years in many different companies, and there's so many companies that are highly distributed that struggle to collaborate. And then I look at places like ThoughtWorks, where I was before, that had this vibrant online culture. And more, this is what companies are needing. And I think Tide's got that kind of an online culture as well. There's all sorts of interactions going on. There's all sorts of collaboration going on discussion boards, on Slack, on what have you. And so getting everybody talking without having doesn't have to be the water cooler. That sort of thing is part of it. And then having all the infrastructure and being cloud native has certainly helped as well.
Cool. Yeah. Great insights. Chris, how about you? How about Immersive Labs and how you did during the pandemic and what's your plan going forward?
So I think, echoing kind of what Kelly said, I think we either tripled or quadrupled in terms of like the size of the company since the start of the pandemic. So it's been kind of rapid growth. And I joined the company 2 days before lockdown 2 in the UK. So coming into a senior leadership position and instantly being thrown into lockdown, I was really unsure, like, how am I going to make an impact? How am I going to make connections? How am I going to build relationships in a remote first kind of environment? But actually, it's kind of worked. And I think it's worked really well. I think the company was already in the mode of working remotely at that point anyway. I think technology has come in a long way. It's almost like an arms race when you look at like video conferencing and all the kind of adaptations that are out there. We've actually been trialing a tool called Gather for the past few months, which is almost like a metaverse style kind of tool. And actually that's been a very different way to engage with people online, as opposed to purely just like being on Zoom calls all day. This gives you a different way to do it. You can walk around a virtual office, you can go and tap someone on the shoulder, have an informal conversation. And we did a mob programming session using it just before Christmas, and it was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. People were walking off, going to sit in a room, have a talk about a certain thing, come back together, sharing their work throughout the day, and it wasn't as tiring as doing it all on a Zoom call all day. I think one of the things I have seen that's kind of taken a hit has been people doing pairing. Pair programming has definitely taken a hit, and mob programming is just not as effective when you're fully remote. I think we just appreciate that. I think the other challenge is for the more junior members of the team. So I think junior members really benefit from being in an office, being around more senior members of the team. They absorb like sponges information. They can very easily and informally get help when they need it. So I think that's the thing we've really encouraged as things have started to open up, that juniors try and spend more time in the office, because it's just so beneficial to their development. Like they are like sponges. They can rapidly, and their trajectory is like this in terms of what they're learning, but they need to be in the right environment to do that. So I think, that's something we've been quite conscious of as we've kind of moved forward. The one thing that has helped me kind of personally kind of coming in is that I spend a lot of my time on one-to-one. So the team that I'm managing now has grown from about 35 to 70. I have a one-to-one with every single person in engineering. It was once every 6 weeks. It's now once every 12 weeks, which is quite a big draw on my time. But at the same time, it's such valuable input for me to be able to speak to everyone in the team and just get a sense of how things are going on the ground when people are fully remote. So yeah, there's some of the things I've had to basically put in place just to make sure that I've got my finger on the pulse of what's happening in the teams. I can be on top of problems. I can also build relationships with people. So when we do have a crisis or a production outage or something's happening, then we know that we've got a relationship that we can build on to help deal with those type of situations. But yeah, I think as a whole, and previously at Just Eat as well, when this kind of hit, most tech companies were pretty well set up to deal with it. I think of my wife's financial services company, a pension company, first week no one could get online because the VPN didn't work, and it was like really, really painful.
Right.
And I think a lot of companies outside of the tech sector, definitely it was a big wake-up call to them and a big struggle to adapt. But I think now they've adapted, they don't want to go back. And I think that's what we're seeing more generally. The one thing I'm really excited about is the future of hybrid work. So we've actually just invested in a brand new flagship HQ office in Bristol, which is amazing, literally an amazing space to be in. But we need to support that inclusiveness of people who are remote as well, really truly embrace kind of hybrid working. And to go hand in hand with the new office, we have a whole new set of working policies around hybrid working, which is all about inclusivity. How can we make everyone feel part of the company, part of the culture, and included whenever we're doing events, whatever that might be.
Yeah, I love the mindset behind, both of these stories. But we had our roadmap, and the subject of our talk is the actual failures and fuck ups. So let's get to that. Like from your, what are the sort of things that are the most challenging for the both of you, like as senior engineering leaders, in times where on one hand you're both in businesses that are expected by its investors to grow super fast, in times where there's probably been never more competitive market for talent. Like, which are the areas where you feel that you're really, really challenged and that occupy the most of your mind space? We'll start from you, Chris.
So I think there's a couple that kind of stick out. Talent is absolutely a challenge, and certainly for me, it's in the back end side of things. So we're built on top of Ruby on Rails stack. And Ruby, which is I find Ruby really interesting because it's a very mature framework. It's very quick to get up and running. Loads of VC-backed companies kind of turn to Ruby to get their products into market. But at the same time, the popularity is kind of just slowly waning over time. So you've got all these VC-backed companies spinning up teams to kind of build Ruby-based apps. And then you've got a market that's kind of waning. And new generation of engineers typically aren't turning to Ruby. They're looking at the more shiny, sexy kind of languages to turn to. So there's this skill shortage, but high demand. So we've seen the market just go crazy over the last kind of 12 months. And we're also seeing the impact of the likes of Shopify and GitHub, GitLab, all the big Ruby shops around the world who are offering these fully remote packages, really, really competitive. And it's very hard to deal with that when they can price us out of the market quite easily. So yeah, definitely finding talent is a challenge. I think the area where we've really been able to kind of counter that is our long-term investment in junior talent. There is so much junior talent out there. And we're not just talking about graduates here. We're talking about all walks of life. People who've been, we actually hired someone last year who'd been a stay-at-home mum for a number of years, had done a few different things working for a husband's company, like accountancy, did an AWS restart course, and has come in as a junior cloud engineer and is absolutely smashing it and brings such a different set of skills and experience to the table. So I'm so like passionate about giving opportunities to people from different backgrounds coming into the tech world, and seeing how we can support them. And that, I think what we do at Immersive Labs, we do that really well. We have such diversity of talent across the business that really helps us. The other thing that I think is a constant challenge, probably for me and Kelly, is around the expectation that we have to grow really quickly. So we're scaling up the team, scaling up everything we do, but don't slow down. We still have to move really fast. And those two things are quite challenging, right? Because communication gets harder, the code base gets more complex and grows over time. And yes, you're trying to always counteract that. We've been investing a lot of focus on developer experience over the last kind of 6-9 months, like really trying to smooth out the toil that developers feel trying to ship code. And those have really benefited us, and we've got a load more work to do in that space. But yeah, that has been one of the biggest challenges for me, is the expectation coming that yes, we've got to double, triple the size of the engineering team, got all this amazing product we want to build, but don't slow down. And it's like, yeah, that is a challenge I think most companies solve. And there isn't like a cookie cutter approach just to make that work, because it all depends on the other parts of your business and the expectations and what you're trying to do and the investment you've got to play with. All of those factors kind of influence how you want to do it. And I think the thing that I try and embrace is we experiment, we try and we test things and we work. And if things don't work, we move on really quickly. But yeah, communication, I think, and like just efficient processes. I basically set up a delivery function when I came into Immersive Labs, because I could see there was a gap around kind of agile practitioners across the teams. We were struggling a little bit with process. We were just going through the motions of Scrum, but not really knowing why. So bringing in a couple of agile coaches to start working across the teams has been pretty transformational. So we have now a much more simplified standard workflow for Jira, for example. We have access to agile metrics that all the teams can use to drive continuous improvement. Just very simple things like that have made a big difference to us and helped us go a little bit faster and a little bit more predictably faster as well.
Yeah, very, very interesting, and we'll dig deeper into some of that. But I'm also curious to listen to you, Kelly. How have you been? Like, what's occupying your mind space? What's the biggest challenge?
I think nowadays most people that you talk to, most people agree it's maybe the most challenging hiring environment that most people have seen in their careers. Trying to find people is an unbelievable challenge, and it goes back to something. Once again, if you've been around as long as I have, these patterns recur. And you've got to look at them kind of carefully. And it reminds me of a failure of my own as a manager that helped me grow quite a bit, in that I remember in growing up in my career, I kind of started out as a manager in Texas. And I remember going out to Silicon Valley and managing a team out in Silicon Valley. And it reminds me of the current environment, because Silicon Valley in the US was even 15, 20 years ago was similar to what we're seeing all over the place right now. Extremely hot environment, tons of demand, engineers, always able to find a better paying job just about any time that they want to. And I remember I kind of went out there as an experienced manager, kind of from one area, from one kind of culture there in Texas that was kind of more of almost kind of autocratic of, hey, here, let me tell everybody what they need to do, what they need to do. And I tried to go out and do that kind of style of management in Silicon Valley, and I was a dismal failure. It was like everybody was like, no, I don't want to do that. That doesn't meet my kind of desires of what I care about doing. And I remember it kind of stumped me at first when I went out there. And I had this explained to me. It was like, look, we have to cater to these folks. They can all go find better jobs. We have to find a way to get them to want to do the work that we need to get done. And so that was it was kind of like, this is a different challenge. what was interesting is, lo and behold, I was actually better at that style of management, kind of being more of a persuasive sort of a person, being more of a leader, getting people to be enthusiastic and helping them to self-manage and self-organize. I was actually better at that than I was ever, at being a dictator, or being an autocrat. So it actually was a better fit for me. But I learned something about myself, and so, I think that in today's environment, you've got to get better and better and better at how to get people to achieve the most and get the most fulfillment out of what they're doing. I mean, what we need as a staff at Tide, we don't need people working day and night. We need people doing great work and enjoying themselves. That's how we get the quality that we need. That's how we get the most value, and we want value for Tide, and we want value for each of our employees as well. And so that's very important to us.
Yeah, and I love the example of your adventure with Silicon Valley and the challenges there. And I feel like, this is definitely the problem now, because from what I hear and when I look at data, it's not just difficult to hire people, but it's also very difficult to keep them because the market
Absolutely.
is so competitive. And, I remember talking with my friend, maybe, a couple of weeks ago. He's in US. He basically set his LinkedIn status open to jobs, and within like 30 days he had like 200 messages from recruiters. He eventually moved to Stripe, but it was like, for him it was more like he would discard companies based on the recruitment process he didn't like. It would be very, very easy for him to be picky. So I love what you finished with, and maybe want to get a little bit more granular, because I feel like both of your organizations are doing some things in a really interesting way. Is like, what are you doing to create this great experience? Because obviously, like, no company at Tech Nation can compete salary-wise with not only Facebook, Google, but also the likes of Shopify. And, we have some of our clients just being, overbidded by Shopify. And yeah, it's like when they're hiring remotely across all Europe, like their offers are unmatchable for most of the startups. So how do you compete with that? Like, what are the things that you can offer to these people to keep them engaged, to keep them with you? You, Kelly, mentioned that it's not about like coding all the time. You, Chris, mentioned about like training people up and actually helping them discover a new career. I'm quite interested in getting more granular into that. Maybe we'll start with you, Chris.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that I was just going to follow on from what Kelly said is that I think the thing that has shifted quite a lot actually is the weight that people now put on the purpose that they're fulfilling for the companies they work for. So I think a job is not just a job anymore. Like, yes, the package and the salary obviously has a big impact, but when there's so many jobs out there, people are being quite selective now, and they want to work for a company where the culture and the purpose of that company resonates with them and their core values. And that's the thing that I think we do really well at Immersive and really, really strongly kind of convey through the interview process. So one of our core values is inclusivity, and it is the most important value in the company. And that's one of the reasons why I joined. And everything we do, from our sourcing of talent through the interview process to the onboarding to everything about working at Immersive Labs, is about being inclusive. It's about people bringing their true self to work. And I think that is just like, that resonates through everything. It's not just something we say. It's not just like lip service. It's actually true about the fabric of the company and how it was built by the founder, which is, it's really incredible. And what we hear from the interview process and everything we've done to adapt it, to make it more inclusive, like we have shortened interviews. We always have gender balanced interview panels, and we do interview training internally to make sure we can do that, which is quite a challenge. And as a result of that, since I joined Immersive, we're like hiring like crazy. We've more than doubled the size of the team. 45% of those hires have been women, as kind of one aspect of that, which for the tech industry is pretty impressive.
Nice.
So
that's awesome.
Yeah, that's inclusivity is one of the things, and then you tie that into the mission of the company. So cybersecurity is in everyone's consciousness. Every week you see a major cyber attack. So every company is thinking about this, and every individual probably is aware of what's happening with cyber attacks and the kind of importance of protecting yourselves against those as a company or an individual. And we're at the forefront of helping companies deal with that. And it's actually, so I'm not coming from a cyber background, but stepping into this, obviously being aware of it through kind of various engineering roles, but now being really ingrained in the whole industry, it is fascinating. It's vast, it's fascinating, it's so fast moving. It's an incredible space to be in. And yeah, being part of a company that's helping companies protect themselves against all the threats that are happening on a daily basis is pretty powerful. So yeah, that's what I think the mission of the company combined with the culture, I think are probably two of the biggest draws for me. That we really play on through the interview process.
Yeah, sounds good. Kelly, how about you guys?
Well, I think, a lot of the research out there has been done about like kind of motivating people. It's let's see, autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Those are the key things that you've got to provide to get people to really like what they're doing. And so we try to provide each of those things at Tide. We build teams that are given autonomy to do their work. We allow them to make their own decisions about how they do their work, about how they solve problems. We give technical leaders a lot of their own ability to kind of solve problems, and that goes all the way down to a different level. So people have a lot of autonomy. We give them a great tech stack and the ability to make their own decisions at different levels there. So we give them a lot of autonomy. We give them a ton of training, the ability to gain mastery as they need to, whether it's by getting help from others within the organization, getting training within the organization, or we've got a nice kind of set of stripes and badges to help you to help people kind of move up and learn more. And there's a plethora of different technologies that we're using. We try very hard to stay close to state of the art in a lot of what we're doing. And so people are working on interesting technology and what's there. And then finally, as Chris said, there's purpose. And there's two sides to that. One, on the diversity side, I think that we started with our executive ranks, and that we're a highly diverse executive team. And then it goes down to within our engineering ranks as well. We're working hard to make it as diverse as possible. It's a difficult problem, but it can be solved. And so we're working on that. And I like that we've started with a really strong, diverse executive team. And then the other part of it with Tide that I find extremely motivating is that Tide is about enabling and helping entrepreneurs worldwide. I don't know if you ever get a chance to see any of our advertisements around the London Tube or what have you. It's always the entrepreneurs that we are helping. And I think doing that in the UK area and then doing it worldwide is a very inspirational message. And I think a lot of people are drawn to helping small business owners get off the ground and get going anywhere in the world. I think that's an exciting thing to be a part of.
Yeah, that sounds great, guys. And maybe we'll also zero in on one thing that both of you have been heavily involved, which is recruiting. Like, what has been working? Because we keep talking about it with different founders, CTOs, etc. And it's quite hard to find like reliable channels in a way, because job boards not necessarily bring you the kind of candidates you want. Recruiters are very much hit and miss, and I think the sort of density of messages people get on LinkedIn is just extremely high. And I don't think engineers are also the kinds of people that like to be stalked and approached unexpectedly. What has been working for you guys? Maybe we'll start with you, Kelly.
Well, I think that what we've got to talk about, as you mentioned, the big companies are out there and they're talking of, that they've got a great story in some areas and what they're doing, but we've got a great story too. We're essentially what I would call a late stage startup, and what that means is that we're a company that can afford to, well, first of all, we're working on, as I mentioned before, we're working on interesting, exciting technology. So there's that part of it. but we can also afford to pay good compensation and good salaries, somewhat like a big company might. Maybe not match every big company out there, but we could pay a good compensation. Excuse me. But then on top of that, we have equity. And coming from the U.S. Market, I feel like I've been somewhat lucky in my career. I've had 6 startups before Tide, as I mentioned. 3 of those, I made more money from my equity than I did for my salary. That's a decent batting average.
Wow.
And so, that's my kind of expectation. If you're in the U.S. tech industry, it's not unusual to know lots of people that made their way in the world, did well in life because of the equity off of stock. And so that's something I like to talk up. I find in Europe a lot of times that kind of gets dismissed.
That's what I wanted to. Yeah.
I don't dismiss it.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you about, because I've been hearing from a lot of people with similar background to yours that they were somewhat disappointed on how little interest there is among European engineers in the equity. And they've been around range of stories. I think one of the one that stood out for me maybe a year or a couple of years ago was like Adi and IPO, where like the first engineers had almost zero stock, and like PayPal IPO is known to have created like a generations of the most influential people in the Silicon Valley, and
Right.
Adi and IPO didn't create anyone to a certain extent. So have you seen any change in terms of how people react to it? Have you been successful talking up the equity part you're able to offer? I'm just very curious of that.
I certainly try very hard. I think that it is a different perception in Europe, but everybody at Tide gets stock, and we're thinking of it more the way a U.S. startup would do stock. It's not only for a few people in the company; it's for everybody in the company.
Yeah,
and so that's our philosophy, and I think that's a healthy one for a burgeoning tech industry.
Yeah, sounds good. Chris, how are you reaching out to people, and what's working for you in terms of the channels and the sort of arguments you're using to really attract great people to join you?
So yeah, I mean, I have to take my hats off to our talent team. I think our talent team are amazing. The amount of amazing, diverse talent they are able to find. So like I said, inclusivity. So D&I is like front and center when it comes to talent sourcing as well. And that's not just our own internal team, but anyone we partner with, we are ensuring that they kind of live and breathe the same values when it comes to D&I, and that they can tap into the markets or the people that we want to be speaking to, which is broad, like everyone possible, basically. And that seems to be working really well. I think the way that we kind of construct the reach out and the job adverts is always done with inclusivity in mind. So we keep points really, really short, for example. We make sure we're using gender neutral language, like all the things that you would do to make that advert really stick out and reach as many people as possible. From my own personal kind of experience, when I had the reach out, typically get lots of these every week, right? But it was the language that was used that drew me in. And that language spoke to me because, I'm very much a people person. I love people first, technology second, and it's always about the people. And that just spoke to me from the first kind of reach out. And then every touch point along the journey, the interview process, the pre-boarding, the onboarding, just strengthened that view of what the culture of the company was like. So that's something we've really nailed. When it comes to the interview process, the bit once we've got the source, the talent source, and we're going to put it through the pipeline, we keep things very simple. We do 2 interviews. We do a cultural interview, which is about 45 minutes. We do a technical interview. We allow them time to prepare for the technical one. And it's very, very simple. And like I said, gender balanced interview panels across both of those pieces as well. And then we make a decision. But that cultural one comes first because that's the most important. If they don't demonstrate the kind of side of the behavior and engineer that we would expect, so the coaching, the mentoring, the collaboration, the communication, those kind of pieces, then they won't make it through to the technical piece. So the cultural one always comes first. So yeah, the interview process is very short, it's very concise, but it's very targeted around the cultural alignment, which is the most key one, alignment of values, and then we follow up with the technical one as well. And I think where we put more weight is on how they think rather than what they know. So if they don't necessarily have Ruby, Okay, that's fine. But if you're a senior engineer who knows OOP, you know how to solve problems and you can communicate how you would solve a problem, then we will happily bring you in and we'll train you up. Like, we can train you hard skills, technical skills. It's more a challenge to give you the kind of soft skills or change your personality to be effective in the role that we're looking to fulfill. So yeah, we put a lot of weight on who the person is, their aptitude for learning, their passionate, their desires, like what they want to do. And that has worked really, really well for us to find people who just have that passion, that energy. I think some of the people we brought in the last 12 months have just taken us to the next level. It's been really fantastic to see. And what Kelly was saying earlier about autonomy, like, yes, we love that. Like, we try and instill in everyone that an idea can come from anyone, from anywhere, about anything. You should feel empowered to bring your ideas to the table. And we use a process of RFC. So I don't know if you're familiar with the process, request for comments. And we've had an apprentice who had joined us 3 months later writing an RFC about a new UI component they wanted to build. And it just blew my mind that someone that fresh into their first tech role felt empowered enough, with support from a more senior member of the team, to construct an RFC and get the comments flowing around this new component they wanted to build. So yeah, that just makes me, that says everything about the culture that we're trying to build here.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. One last question I have, that is my typical questions in these panels, is like, failure is an everyday thing at startups. Like, you do tough things, you do things that have not been done before, and you or your team or different people, if they try enough times, they will for sure fail at some point. How do you deal with failure as part of your organizational culture? Like, what's your attitude to that? How do you balance carefulness and diligence with encouraging people to have bets and views and risk doing new things? Maybe we'll start with Kelly.
Yeah, I think it's really important to establish an embracing of it. And this is an interesting, one of the reasons why I joined Tide is, I love to work internationally because I love, they always talk about in DevOps, it's a cultural problem. There's, dev and ops culture, but I like the actual culture things. I like I'm in Vienna right now, so there's a culture of the Austrians versus a culture in India versus a culture in the UK. And I love the issues related to things along those sorts of lines. And that's one of the things that you'll find is, what's the attitude around failure? I've been places where they seem to want to have leadership that pretends they never fail. And it's just never healthy and never works. I think that one of my favorite quotes from my time at Amazon was Jeff Bezos talked about the famous Fire phone, which was kind of a fiasco. Amazon tried to make a phone, and it was a horrible failure. They ended up with loads of them in warehouses that never got sold and everything. And he basically said, if you think that's a big failure, we're working on much bigger failures right now, and I'm not kidding. And so his whole point was, what he learned over time, and what I think is really true, is that getting this thing of learning from failure is incredibly important. The key becomes, when you get as big as Amazon, you can afford to fail to some extent. You can afford to fail in pretty big ways. The key for most companies is to make failure cheap. So, that you'll hear fail fast a lot, which is let's try things, and then if they don't work, let's learn from it. The point is to learn. You don't try to fail, but it's try things, see what is right and what is wrong, and then learn from the things that are wrong and learn from the things that are right. And so that's what I mean by embracing failures. And the last thing I'll talk about that's sort of an Amazon type of thing is that they discuss this idea of two-way doors, which is to try things where you can try something and you can get back out if you need to. There's a way out of the situation. It's not just you can only go one way. And so these are all kind of techniques to kind of anticipate, to kind of deal with failure.
Yeah, I love the example. So thanks a lot, Kelly. Chris, what are your thoughts on that? How do you deal with failure and kind of like a cultural approach to it at Immersive Labs or earlier in your career?
So very, very aligned to Kelly's views on this. I think he's spot on with the kind of embracing failure. I think there's very simple things you can do, like when you have a production outage, for example, don't call the meeting that discusses what happened a post-mortem. Call it a retrospective, because it's all about learning. And I think I love it when things go wrong, and I try and instill that in everyone. I'm always a silver lining type of person. Doesn't matter what failed, what happened, if it was a product that didn't work, if it was an experiment that went wrong, if it was a production outage where we just shipped some code that we shouldn't have shipped. There's always learning. You can always improve things off the back of a failure. And I think, yeah, I try and instill that with everyone. And it's always about, yeah, the positives. There's always a learning there that we can take forward from this situation and make things better for the future. And I think, yeah, failures give you as much value as your successes, in my opinion. And I think, yeah, that's definitely something throughout my whole career I've tried to instill that, especially when I've been the one doing the failures as well.
Yeah.
Back in the day, Esther Dyson used to have a signature line on her email. It was, "Esther always makes new mistakes." And I think that's the philosophy to take. You're always willing to make a mistake. You just don't want to make the one you've made before.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also heard
Yeah, I
one
love
concept
that.
that I really like, which is like fail forward. That you fail, but it actually helps you to move forward. And because you've learned something, you've analyzed something, it's kind of like a scientific approach. If you have a hypothesis in science and you're not able to prove that hypothesis, you still learn something.
Absolutely.
And I think this is the important part. Look, guys, it's been a pleasure. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for all the insights, and both of you are in amazing organizations in really amazing times. But your personal learnings are what I think really matters. And for everyone in the audience, I think if you're interested in both Immersive and Tide, you can reach out to the guys. Either here or on LinkedIn or other places, because it looks like they're running very cool organizations that are growing super fast and need people like you. So thanks a lot. And